Joy, beautiful spark of gods, daughter of Elysium, we enter, drunk with fire, Heavenly One, thy sanctuary. Your magic binds again what custom strictly divided. All people become brothers, where your gentle wing abides. This hymn, which makes reference to fraternal warmth and the disposition towards what is truly human and not animal in man, inspired noble Schiller to write the immortal stanzas of his Hymn to Joy or Hymn to Humanity. On this day, October the 27th, 2019, we are invoking inner peace for human beings. As we well know that from peace it is possible to create a new fraternal humanity based on friendship and joy. But for this to happen, we must look inside the cause of discord, as it gets us far away from the benign influence of our real nature. I believe that for humanity to enter the new culture of fraternal love, it is important to understand and experience its real nature first. This real nature consists of love, joy, happiness, benevolence, consideration, and also the acknowledgement of the sacred in others, which involves compassion and understanding of the defects of our siblings. But there is another type of nature we are all very familiar with and committed to, that of suffering, worrying, anxiety, trauma, fear, depression. As all this is so present in our everyday life, we have come to the conclusion that the expression of this type of nature is also real. Therefore, our ordinary global conclusion, without us having meditated on it or analyzed it in any way, affirms that our human nature is dual, and we must accept both types of nature as parts of a universal truth. Besides, in order to reinforce and justify this mistaken vision, it is said that the nature of suffering is normal, so we must accept it, embrace it, and integrate it in our lives, because if we reject it, we then run the risk of living without any balance. This conclusion has become the official voice all over the planet, and those who are against this truth are taken and considered as ignorant. However, if we make a comparative study of the spiritual and philosophical traditions of all times, we will find that what they teach and point out is the fact that the human being only has one real nature, the spiritual one, whose fundamental expression is happiness. It is interesting to see how the new transpersonal psychology, also called the fourth force of psychology, has been working since the 50s on the acknowledgement and exaltation of the spiritual condition of the human being. What is our spiritual nature made of? It's made of happiness, as Schiller says. Joy is a virtue analogous to happiness. Therefore, it is connected to the perception of the beauty of life in all of its forms. Joy continues to be a part of our own nature, but it cannot manifest itself in its maximum expression, as it is conditioned by different aspects of our ego, which fragment and suffocate our consciousness. What is the ego? It is the sadness you experience. It is anxiety, depression, fear, pride, revenge. Have you ever learned anything from it? No. On the contrary, you have sunk even more into sadness, depression, worries. There is no wisdom there. What happens is that there is sloth. This means that it is better and easier to surrender to suffering than to cultivate joy. Obviously, none of this is part of the original human design. Definitely not. I repeat, if we read the books of the great sacred traditions, we will realize that the human design is based on a spiritual gene which includes happiness but not suffering or its consequences. Rather, the gurus and masters of authentic traditions emphasize the fact that the purpose of life is to allow us to elevate ourselves above suffering, whose root is ignorance. And those who dare to do this throughout their lives will become self-realized, enlightened beings. Then we will be able to live, as Paul describes it in his Gospel, from glory to glory every day. Our life is meant to unmask the ego. So, in this process, as Paul points out, we will also be able to be happy even before adversity. Besides, it turns out that this reality that we take as truthful is actually false, a mirage. For this reason, we must dare know the true reality. But for this to happen within us, we must make an inner voyage. That is what masters and researchers who work from their hearts have called the journey of the hero, the journey in which one conquers oneself. Gautama Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, called it the path of the conqueror. A very evident sign of the presence of the ego that has gone unnoticed in the human being is unconsciousness. And unconsciousness stems from ignorance, from the fact of not knowing or not having experienced love, happiness, beauty, and the realities and emotions of a superior nature. The human being's unconscious actions are perceived as real, authentic, conscious acts, but actually they are not. One example is violence and all its manifestations, which has divided man inside himself and has separated him from his brothers and sisters. We need a new culture, and the first thing man has to do in order to reconquer his spiritual nature is to work for his own regeneration. This is achieved through the gradual elimination of ignorance in each of us, as this is part of the egoic nature. We will know that because we have an egoic nature, when human beings interact, the predominant trait is cruelty. This must become history. This is the reason why the sages of all times and latitudes have always recommended non-violence or ahimsa. The daily practice of non-violence develops love. Ahimsa, non-violence, is another name for truth or love. Ahimsa is universal love. Where there is love, there is ahimsa. Where there is ahimsa, there is love and uninterested service. All these virtues go together. Non-violence is the best and most noble of all types of behavior that we could express in life and in everyday activities. Non-violence is the only way to reach and enjoy inner peace and uninterrupted bliss. In its complete meaning, it involves to absolutely refrain from causing any harm to any living creature, be it through our thoughts, words, or actions. In order not to harm, we need harmless hands, gestures, mouths, and minds. The fact of not expressing rage involves the development of a mental attitude in which hatred is replaced by love. If you want to know and experience your crystalline nature, you have to make a sincere vow in this life, which is so short. This vow is about incarnating love. Make the vow of non-violence. Remember that every time that you manifest violence, you break your vow. Every time you express contempt for others, unfriendliness, or irrational prejudice, you break your vow. Every time you abuse someone, every time you speak badly about others, every time you gossip or slander someone's name, every time you harbor thoughts of hatred, you break your vow of non-violence and you are walking away from your real nature. Keep up your ideal of love, of non-violence. Try to reach this ideal even if your steps may be uncertain at first. Have a clear mental image of non-violence and its unmeasurable advantages. If you achieve this by practicing for a few months, thoughts of revenge will simply die, as they will not have the opportunity to express themselves externally. In this way, little by little, you will attain inner peace, which is so longed and desired for in the heart of every human being. I would like to end this message on the day of inner peace with the words from Schiller's poem, which Beethoven used at the beginning of his Ninth Symphony. Oh friends, stop those rough chants. Let us sing other more pleasant ones, full of joy, joy, joy. Happy day of inner peace.